Juliaca, Peru.
The riot has left at least 17 people dead in the latest violence in the country's month-old political crisis. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Rich Yelago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. Marcos administration greenlights importation of onions. More defense officials resign after the exit of OIC Senior Undersecretary Jose Faustino Jr. A 7.2 quake shakes Indonesia and East Timor. As his supporters ransack Brazil, former President Jair Bolsonaro is hospitalized. And White House says classified files are found in Biden's think tank office. Despite the opposition by Onion Farmers Group, the government pushes through with its planned importation of onions. Mayan Corvera reports.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. gave the green light to recommendations from the Department of Agriculture to import 21,060 metric tons of onions starting this Tuesday, January 10 until January 27 of 2023. Agriculture Assistant Secretary Rex Estopera said there is a need to import onions to address the supply shortage and ease the skyrocketing prices of the commodity.
The decision to import of onion is already signed by Yusek Panganiban, and based on our recommendation, he informed the President on this already bago pa permahan. So SPSIC will be issued now to the applicants. The importation is yung volume. We have to consider the factors like the volume and the when to import. So the volume is 21,060. Ang recommended is 22,000, so short by 960 based on need na ni-recommended.
The day official admitted that despite the issuance of a suggested retail price or SRP of 250 pesos per kilo of onion, the farm gate price of the commodity in the provinces ranges from 280 to 300 pesos per kilo. Estoperes acknowledged that it would be difficult to sell onions at lower prices. He added that the imported product is expected to be on the market by January 17, where the public could see the lowering of onion prices. The agriculture official assured that importation would be transparent and the information of the importer and their storage facilities would be made public. This is to ensure that smugglers cannot take advantage of the importation, which could affect the livelihood of the local onion farmers.
We don't like to import sana dahil nga we have to break yung cycle na nag-import tayo tapos masisira yung ating anihan no, sa sibuyas. But in the ground, tiningnan namin mukhang hindi bumababa ang presyo rin ng farm gate. Eh kung kahit bababaan mo pa yung farm gate to the level of the 250 na sinet natin nung from December 28 to January 7, wala rin sa level na yon. So from the farm gate, yung atin pong mga buyers and traders, papatong pa pagdating sa pamilihan, ganun pa rin ang presyo to the tune of 500 to 700 or 600 pesos. So walang pagbaba. And the result of this is yung onion price drives the inflation also.
Once the imported supply of the onion arrives in the country, the Agriculture Department is targeting to lower down the prices of onions from 120 to 150 pesos per kilo. In their monitoring, Estopera said current prices of the onions in the market range from 500 to 600 per kilo.
Nagkataon na talaga namang may harvest na yung off-season harvest na napakinabangan ng ating mga magsasaka. But we cannot also sacrifice yung ating pong mga consumers na mataas ang presyo pa rin, no? Even though sasabihin na natin, spices lang yan eh. Iba nagsabi can live without onions, but, yan po parte na ng kusina yan. Hindi mo nang pwedeng sabihin na pabayaan yun. So, yun. Kailangan din natin talagang aksyonan yan.
Because of onions' high prices, a number of market goers patiently queue at Kadiwa stores in the DA office. Prices of onions is much lower in Kadiwa stores with 170 pesos per kilo, and each customer can buy up to 3 kilos.
Nasa 500 pa po. Minsan may
500 pa rin.
600 pa minsan.
So pag dito, mas malaking save.
Opo.
Ilang kilo po yung bibili ng sibuyas?
1 kilo lang po.
Dito meron mura eh.
The DA said the problem with onion prices is only temporary since the government is working on mechanism to help the affected farmers. Mayan Corvera for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The Office of the Ombudsman has stepped in to investigate the skyrocketing prices of onion in the country. The Office of the Ombudsman would particularly look into the procurement of 537 pesos per kilo of onion by Bonena Multipurpose Cooperative. Ombudsman Samuel Martirez said they would invite officials from the Food Terminal Incorporated or FTI and officials of the Department of Agriculture. The Ombudsman learned that the DA provided the 140 million peso funding while the FTI bought the onions from Banana Multipurpose Cooperative. Martinez said that they would seek explanation from FTI and DA officials why they bought that amount of money to the cooperative. Information reaching the Ombudsman said the onions brought were used for the Kadiwa centers during the holiday season.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has ordered a phytosanitary inspection of smuggled onions before they are released in the market. The move is to ensure their safety since the source of these onions is unknown. The president said the government is negotiating with a third party to conduct the phytosanitary inspection. The president fears that just one batch of the uninspected smuggled onions released in the market could cause illness to the public. In an earlier inspection, some smuggled onions were found not suitable for human consumption. The Bureau of Customs is considering donating the rest of the shipments of smuggled agricultural products, including onions, to Kadiwa stores.
House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Joey Salcedo exposed that Subic Port is a major point of entry of smuggled goods in the country. He said that the panel would try to uncover in its investigation corrupt officials in the Subic Port that conspire with smuggling syndicates. The Albay Congressman said smuggling activities have cost millions of pesos in losses to government tax collection. Smuggled goods in the Subic port include petroleum products, sugar, rice, onion, and other agricultural products. Salcedo said the House panel would use its oversight power to end the smuggling activities in the Subic port.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. has appointed Cheloy Garafil as Secretary of the Presidential Communications Office, or PCO. The president administered her oath in a video released by Malacanang. Garafil was the former officer in charge with the rank of undersecretary. Prior to her appointment as the communications secretary, Garafil served as the chairperson of the Land Transportation, Franchising, and Regulatory Board, or LTFRB. She is a lawyer by profession and a former journalist. She also worked with the Department of Justice, Office of the Solicitor General, and the House of Representatives. Her appointment follows an earlier directive of President Marcos Jr. streamlining agencies under the Office of the President. The former Office of the Press Secretary was renamed the Presidential Communications Office with the appointment of Daphne Osenia Paez as the presidential briefer. Following her oath-taking, Garafil joined fellow officials in a cabinet meeting presided by President Marcos Jr. Newly appointed Defense Secretary Carlito Galvez also attended the meeting.
More senior defense officials tendered their resignations following the exit of Defense OIC Jose Faustino Jr. Randy Bernardino with more details.
More senior defense officials submitted their courtesy resignations following the resignation of Defense Officer in Charge Senior Undersecretary Jose Faustino Jr. The Department of National Defense or DND spokesman Arsenio Andolong said around 7 to 9 officials with the ranks of Undersecretary and Assistant Secretary tendered their resignations. However, Andolong said the resignations were procedural for coterminous appointees in the government. The official said operations at the department are normal, and they are just waiting for the newly appointed Defense Secretary, Carlito Galvez, to assume office. Faustino tendered his irrevocable resignation last Friday as he learned from social media reports the return of General Andres Centinos as AFP Chief of Staff. Without giving details, Faustino said in a statement that he would not allow the AFP's reputation to be tarnished, maligned, or politicized. He said he wished nothing but the best for the country, the people, and the president, as he expressed gratitude for those who helped him fulfill his duty as DND OIC in the past months. Faustino's resignation came amid reports of a destabilization plot against the administration. It was denied by both the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the Philippine National Police. Randy Bernardino for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Despite the entry of new variants, the COVID-19 positivity rate in the National Capital Region, or NCR, dropped to 5.8% in the first week of January. This was confirmed by Octa Research Fellow Dr. Guido David. Based on Octa Research, the percentage of people who tested positive for COVID-19 in the NCR dropped to 5.8% from 9.1% in December last year. Meanwhile, the positivity rate of the Luzon region with Batangas, Bulacan, Ilocos Norte, and Pangasinan recorded a low level of 5%. Bulacan recorded the lowest data at 3.5%, less than the 4.4% reported last week.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, appealed to the public to register for the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections, or BSKE, in October. To attract more registrants, the poll body plans to expand its Register Anywhere project, or RAP. Madeline Villar Moratilio reports.
The Commission on Elections, or COMELEC, has added sites for the Register Anywhere project, or RAP. These are for voters who are in Metro Manila but want to register to be able to vote in their provinces for the Barangay and Sangguniang Kabataan elections, or BSKE. The poll body signed today a Memorandum of Understanding with the Government Service Insurance System, or GSIS, to use GSIS main office in Pasay City as a RAP venue. For citizens who are interested to register, the GSIS RAP site will be open today, January 10 up to January 13, and on January 16 to 20 from 8 in the morning until 5 o'clock in the afternoon at the GSIS Gymnasium Financial Center. Registration is open to GSIS employees, their families, relatives, and the general public. COMELEC Chairman George Garcia said the poll body plans to establish additional RAP sites. The poll body is arranging the establishment of RAP sites at the Senate and House of Representatives. Apart from these venues, COMELEC said RAP site registrations will continue in Metro Manila, like in SM Mall of Asia, SM Fairview, SM South Mall, Robinson's Place Manila, and Galleria. Meanwhile, RAP in Region 5 is ongoing at SM Legazpi Albay, Robinson's Mall Naga, and Robinson's Mall Tacloban in Region 8. Registration in the venues runs on weekends until the end of January. Garcia appealed to the public to go out and register, as the poll body is not keen on extending voter registration.
Pag magsisimula lagi ang registration, either sa tinatamad yung mga kababayan natin, busy talaga, o talagang hindi nila nabibigyan ng panahon, hindi po ganun kadami ang nagpaparehistro. Bakit po ba naman hindi natin samantalahin na pumunta sa bawat local COMELEC ngayon? May mga sa mall pa po, meron tayong satellite registration. Wala po halos mga pila, wala pong mga nakaupo nga sa mga silya.
Since the COMELEC opened its registration last December, almost 400,000 new voters have registered, far from the 1.5 to 2 million registrants targeted by the poll body. COMELEC also noted the low turnout of voter registration for overseas absentee voting.
Hindi pa rin po ganun kadami ang nagpaparehistro ng mga kababayan natin abroad. Baka po hinihintay pa nila. Total naman, sabi nila, hanggang 2024 naman pala. Pero wag po sanang ganun. Alam nyo po, tatandaan ng bawat isa sa atin, ang pagpaparehistro ay obligasyon. Ang pagboto, karapatan po yan.
Madilim Villar Moratillo for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Officials of the Department of Transportation and Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines appeared before the House Committee on Transportation. The investigation begins on the January 1 air traffic management fiasco at Ninoy Aquino International Airport. Paulo Ramos has the details.
The House Committee on Transportation has started its probe into the New Year airspace shutdown. It was caused by a problem in the Air Traffic Management or ATM system of the Ninoy Aquino International Airport or NAIA. House Committee Chairman Congressman Romeo Acop said the congressional inquiry aims to resolve the problem, which caused hundreds of international and domestic flight cancellations and left thousands of passengers stranded.
While most of us welcomed 2023 with renewed hope and optimism, some were greeted with a frustrating experience brought by the sudden failure of the air navigation system, which led to delay, diversion, or cancellation of flights on the very first day of the year. We have heard the many versions of what transpired last New Year's Day and heard how it burdened people who found themselves in the middle of it. But the bottom line is the Philippines became a veritable no-fly zone for more or less 7 hours, from 10 a.m. to around 4 p.m. It was 9:49 a.m. when it was noted that the ATMC had no power, leading to its service disruption.
Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista attended the hearing, as well as Director General Manuel Antonio Tamayo of the Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines. The transportation chief apologized for the trouble caused by the system glitch, resulting in delayed and canceled flights.
Itong system na to is in its midlife, no? Kasi po, as explained earlier, nag-start po yung system na to, yung construction niya 2010, no? So it's a 2010 technology, no? And as I have discussed with the manufacturer, no, sila po sa kanya galing yung term na midlife, no? I just adopted that statement from the manufacturer na it's in its midlife, no? And there's a need po to really improve it or do some more upgrades, no?
To avoid a repeat of the incident, CAAP head Tamayo said the agency has acquired a backup uninterrupted power supply or UPS system. CAAP procured 2 UPS systems on January 5 and is now in the process of installing them. Tamayo also assured that the damaged circuit breaker, which caused the ATM system to stop, was already replaced. He added that CAAP and DOTR met with the system supplier for the planned procurement of the CNS ATM backup and redundancy system amounting to 139 million pesos and included in the 2023 national budget. The deal is being finalized in the first quarter of the year.
Then the engineers from CAAP immediately performed remedial measures such as manual re-energizing of the UPS and bypassing the circuit breaker, which enabled power supply to be operational by 1:40 p.m. and resumption of partial operations by 4 p.m.
Paulo Ramos for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Supreme Court has declared as unconstitutional the Joint Marine Seismic Undertaking, or JMSU, which the Philippines entered into with China and Vietnam in 2005. The Supreme Court, en banc, ruled that the JMSU was void for allowing wholly owned foreign corporations to explore the country's natural resources without observing constitutional safeguards. The JMSU was an agreement by the Philippine National Oil Company, China National Offshore Oil Corporation, and Petro Vietnam on an area of over 1,000 kilometers in the South China Sea. In a press briefer, the court stated that the JMSU was executed to determine if petroleum existed in the area. The court noted that the term exploration pertains to a search or discovery of something. But the JMSU involves the exploration of the country's natural resources, particularly petroleum. Thus, the court declared the JMSU unconstitutional. Later in the news, 17 people are dead in the latest clashes in Peru. Security forces dismantle a makeshift base camp made by rioters in the Brazilian capital. And U.S. President Joe Biden has authorized an emergency declaration in flood-ravaged California. Find out more about these stories when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
This portion is brought to you by 318 Automart, Arlex Trading and Construction Supplies.
The news continues here on Mata ng Agila International. At least 17 people have died in Peru on Monday. Protesters tried to storm an airport and clashed with security forces in the latest violent spasm of a month-old political crisis. Officials in the local ombudsman's office said this new chapter of bloodshed took place in the southeastern city of Juliaca in the Puno region. The protesters were demanding the departure of President Dina Boluarte, who took over after then President Pedro Castillo was ousted and arrested on December 7. Castillo's removal has triggered weeks of clashes nationwide in a country beset by years of political instability. Protesters angry over Castillo's removal demand for Boluarte's resignation and a new election right away. They have already been moved up from 2026 to April of 2024. An official at Carlos Monge Hospital told a Peruvian TV channel the casualties in Juliaca had gunshot wounds. Overall, the clashes sparked by the ouster of Castillo have now left 34 people dead around the country.
A 7.6 magnitude earthquake hit deep under the ocean off Indonesia and East Timor early Tuesday. It injured at least one person and rattled nearby islands, damaging homes and forcing residents to flee in panic. The U.S. Geological Survey reports the epicenter of the quake was 427 kilometers south of the Indonesian island of Ambon at a depth of 95 kilometers. Indonesia's Meteorology, Climatology, and Geophysics Agency said the tremor was felt on the eastern islands of Timor, the Maluku Archipelago, and Papua, with some aftershocks at a magnitude of 5.5. The country's disaster mitigation agency reported at least 15 homes and 2 schools were damaged in the Tanimbar Islands. Initially, the Indonesian Geophysics Agency warned about a potential tsunami, but later lifted the warning.
Brazilian ex-president Jair Bolsonaro has been hospitalized with abdominal pain. Media reports say Bolsonaro was taken to a hospital outside of Orlando, Florida, where he was staying. He traveled to Florida 2 days before his term as president ended on December 31st. Bolsonaro's wife confirmed his hospitalization in an Instagram post. He is under observation due to abdominal discomfort from a stabbing attack during his presidential campaign in 2018.
Brazilian security forces are cleaning up debris after a far-right mob stormed the country's seat of power in the capital, Brasilia. Hundreds of soldiers and police dismantled a makeshift camp that protesters set up outside the army's headquarters. Some 3,000 supporters of ex-president Jair Bolsonaro pitched tents and used the camp as a base for their attack. At least 1,500 people have been arrested after rioters ransacked the Congress Presidential Palace and Supreme Court. President Luis Inacio Lula da Silva and other political leaders in the country condemned the action, calling it an attempted coup. Large contingents of police remain in the capital, keeping the government headquarters locked down. Despite the violence, no deaths were reported in the attack.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador rejects what he calls the irresponsible and anti-democratic attitude in Brazil. López Obrador speaks out in favor of Brazilian President Luis Inacio Lula da Silva after supporters of ex-president Jair Bolsonaro stormed the capital. The chaotic scenes have triggered a global shock.
Heavy rains in Northern California caused rivers in the region to swell and overflow their banks. Evacuation orders are in effect for low-lying areas in at least 2 countries as the stormy weather moved in. In Santa Cruz Monday morning, streets were flooded. Mudslides blocked a highway and a bridge collapsed into a river beneath it. By afternoon, the flood warnings were downgraded from moderate to minor. People were told to stay home and not travel as a number of roads were washed out. The California Highway Patrol tweeted that it conducted several rescues Monday morning. More wet weather is expected, with some regions expected to receive up to 30 centimeters of rain by Wednesday night.
U.S. President Joe Biden has authorized an emergency declaration for the state of California. Biden says the federal assistance aims to lessen or avert the threat of a catastrophe in the worst affected areas. Disaster relief efforts will be coordinated under the Federal Emergency Management Agency and the Department of Homeland Security. California Governor Gavin Newsom already announced his own state-level disaster announcement, but Newsom says a presidential decree frees up additional resources from federal agencies. As of Monday evening, more than 93,000 Californians remained without power. California's largest power operator says their hundreds of workers are already attempting to restore electricity to homes and businesses.
The White House reports that classified documents of U.S. President Joe Biden have been found at a Washington think tank office. The documents were reportedly from Biden's tenure as Barack Obama's vice president. Biden's lawyers discovered the documents last November while clearing out the office space and handing them over to the National Archives. Special Counsel Richard Sauber said the White House is cooperating with the National Archives and the Department of Justice. Sauber described it as a small number of documents with classified markings that were found at the Penn Biden Center, a think tank affiliated with the University of Pennsylvania. He said they were in a locked closet at the time. CBS News reported that Attorney General Merrick Garland assigned the U.S. Attorney in Chicago to review the documents. The FBI is also investigating. The report says about 10 documents are involved, and an unidentified source familiar with them said none contains nuclear secrets. In August, authorities searched ex-President Donald Trump's residence at Mar-a-Lago. This was after he failed to respond to repeated requests to return documents taken from the White House after his 2020 election loss. The FBI found thousands of government documents in the ex-president's Florida club, including more than 100 that were marked classified and some marked top secret. Subjects covered in the documents reportedly included sensitive intelligence on China and Iran and nuclear secrets.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump claims that China saw the Biden think tank classified files found at the University of Pennsylvania. Trump said on Truth Social that a vice president cannot declassify documents which are covered by the Federal Records Act. He asserts that the law is criminal in nature and much tougher than the Presidential Records Act. He argues that the Presidential Records Act is not criminal and says a president like him can declassify files. Trump asks how much more information has been given to China. He suggests the FBI should raid Biden's many homes. During a press conference, a reporter asked Biden to comment on the discovery of classified documents at his office. The U.S. president apparently ignored the question and continued to answer other queries. Meanwhile, news sources say it is unclear why Trump accused the Penn Biden Center of being funded by China. A New York Post article published last year noted the University of Pennsylvania had received $54.6 million in Chinese donations between 2014 and 2019.
China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin says that relevant countries should not engage in political manipulation. This was in response to a question about the suspension of issuing short-term visas to South Koreans. China announced a downgrading of COVID-19 as a Class B infectious disease and temporary measures on cross-border travel. Wenbin says many countries welcomed the announcement, while others responded with restrictions on travelers from China. The spokesman claims China communicated with the relevant countries with utmost sincerity and facts, adding that their measures are science-based and reasonable. Wenbin regrets few countries still disregard science. He says China firmly rejects other countries' discriminatory entry restrictions. China, in turn, will take reciprocal measures. The spokesperson emphasized that measures should not be discriminatory and should not affect normal cross-border travel and people-to-people exchanges.
A report claims Pfizer board member Scott Gottlieb used his influence to pressure Twitter to flag a tweet that casted doubt on COVID-19 vaccines. Journalist Alex Berenson reported Gottlieb's tweet said natural immunity was more effective and urged the government to follow the science. The former FDA official also advised people to get vaccinated. But documents show that on August 27, 2021, Gottlieb emailed Todd O'Boyle, a top lobbyist in Twitter's Washington office, after seeing a tweet criticizing the COVID vaccines. Allegedly, he said in the email the tweet was corrosive to the nationwide COVID vaccination campaign. Though Twitter could not prove that there was a violation of misinformation, it flagged the tweet as misleading. Reports say Gottlieb never requested the tweet be labeled as misleading. But Berenson argues that Gottlieb's motivation for quashing the tweet was financial gain. 50% of Pfizer's profits in 2021 came from its mRNA jabs, and Gottlieb was paid $365,000.
Up next, U.S. to give additional $100 million to Pakistan Flood Recovery Fund.
An additional
Residents in Indian Himalayas evacuate as their own or town sinks. And UK's first ever rocket launch fails. Details of these and more when Mata ng Agila International returns.
This portion is brought to you by Robic Builders, Quezon City Motor Vehicle Inspection Center.
Mga ka-Net 25, nakapag-selfie ka ba kasama ang Net 25 Agila? Tumutok sa Net 25 at abangan ang announcement namin ng mga nanalo ng 5 iPhones, 3 100,000 pesos, 5 50,000 pesos, 10 25,000 pesos, 5 iPad at 3 winners ng brand new car. Baka ikaw na isa sa mga winners. Let's net together in 2023 sa Net 25.
Pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's net together. Sa Net 25.
This portion is brought to you by Source Alliance.
The United States Agency for International Development, or USAID, or USAID, says that the U.S. is pledging an additional $100 million or $100 million commitment to Pakistan to help it recover from the devastating 2022 monsoon floods. USAID Deputy Administrator for Policy and Programming, Isabel Coleman, says there are millions of people in Pakistan still displaced and suffering the consequences of the flooding last year. Coleman says many of them are the most vulnerable in Pakistan society. He says this holds true around the world. The impacts affect the most vulnerable even in middle-income countries, and tremendous needs are seen.
And still suffering the consequences of the flooding.
Pakistan's Prime Minister has asked of the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, for a pause in its demands for economic reforms before releasing more financial aid. The country is trying to rebuild after catastrophic floods. Shahbaz Sharif says he is trying to persuade the IMF to give Islamabad some breathing space as it tackles the nightmarish situation.
You know the plight of poor people in developing countries. So kindly be considerate and compassionate and give us some breathing space. Well, this is an ongoing dialogue. I'm sure one day soon we will be able to convince them through logic and through facts. That said, regardless, we will comply with IMF program.
Global lender wants Pakistan to withdraw remaining subsidies on petroleum products and electricity aimed at helping the masses. The United Nations in Geneva held a conference on Pakistan's recovery from last year's catastrophic monsoon floods. Shahbaz was asked by reporters about the block on IMF funds. He said Pakistan's economy has crumbled alongside a simmering political crisis, with the rupee plummeting and inflation at decades-high levels. The global energy crisis and floods have piled on further pressure.
Palestinian medics drive ambulances along the border fence between Israel and the Gaza Strip in protest. This is after Israel allegedly prevented a shipment of medical equipment from entering the besieged enclave. Medics carry banners claiming Israeli controls are causing the slow death of patients in Gaza. A spokesman for the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza says the Israeli occupation prevents the introduction of the interventional catheterization device. He says this device can save stroke patients from death or paralysis. He adds 4 mobile C-arm X-ray machines cannot be delivered. These machines are used to diagnose bone conditions and fractures. He says the Israeli occupation deliberately inflicts harm on patients in the Gaza Strip, infringing on their rights guaranteed by international humanitarian law.
The United States, Canada, and Mexico have signed the American Declaration on Partnership for Equity and Racial Justice. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, and her Mexican counterpart Marcelo Ebrard all signed during the North American Leaders Summit in Mexico City. Blinken said every nation has members of marginalized groups that face discrimination and barriers that hinder them from completely participating in society. He added that with the signed declaration, each nation acknowledges the responsibility to work with fierce urgency to knock down barriers. The declaration was seen as a great effort to dismantle the culture of racism and a historic step to eradicate deep-seated injustice.
Authorities in India are evacuating people from one of the towns in the Himalayas after hundreds of homes began sinking. The cause of the problem in the town of Joshimath is unclear, but residents are blaming it on roads and tunnels that are being built for a nearby hydroelectric project. Local officials say about 60 people have been moved into shelters, and many more will likely be relocated. Residents of the town of 20,000 say some 600 houses and other buildings are sinking. They say people have been forced to sleep on the streets in the freezing cold. They add people have been warning authorities for weeks about cracks in buildings and roads. Joshimath is a major gateway to a number of important religious sites in the Himalayas. It attracts thousands of pilgrims every year.
The lawyer for former U.S. fighter pilot Daniel Duggan claims his client is being singled out for extradition to the United States over training allegations. A 2017 indictment unsealed in December states Duggan is accused of teaching Chinese pilots how to land on aircraft carriers. He is also suspected of money laundering and violating U.S. arms control regulations. But Duggan's lawyer, Dennis Miralles, says his client denies the allegations. He asserts the Department of Defense knew of many Australians providing military services to foreign states. Miralles also argues that they intend to contest the extradition request. As of now, Duggan remains in custody in Sydney. His next court date is on February 13.
Britain's attempt to launch its first ever rocket from UK soil ended in failure. The 70-meter rocket was launched from a modified Boeing 747, which took off from Cornwall in southwest England. At a height of 35,000 feet over the Atlantic Ocean, the rocket was released. Although it ignited, it failed to reach orbit. The rocket carried 9 small satellites. All were lost when it failed. The satellites had a variety of civil and defense functions. They ranged from sea monitoring to help detect human trafficking to space weather observation. Hundreds of people watched the launch. They quickly left after the announcement that the mission had failed.
When we return, for the first time, European gas prices exceed $800. British football superstar Gareth Bale retires. And FDCP extends support to Dolly De Leon at the Golden Globe Awards. All these and more when Mata ng Agila International returns.
kasama ni Attorney Sal Panelo, ang mayor ng San Manuel Tarlac, Mayor Doña Tesoro.
Never ko naisip yung showbiz kasi talagang mahal na mahal ko yung public service eh. Actually, nagkakaroon ako ng mga offers in the past, pero ayokong matag as a celebrity politician eh.
Sa Counterpoint, tuwing Miyerkules alas 10:30 ng gabi, dito sa Net 25.
Si Mayor, saludo tayo dyan. Thumbs up.
Hindi tumibok ang iyong puso.
Thumbs up.
Okay, thumbs up. Parang nakilala ko na yung boyfriend mo, si Mark. Di ba si Mark ang boyfriend mo?
Sino Mark?
O si Sunny?
Sino si Sunny? Oy!
Ngayong linggo sa Cine Throwback.
Ba't kasi natulog ka eh? Eh, napagod ako eh. Siyempre man, dapat matulog ang tao. Saka? Pag madaling siya umuwi baka maunahan pa kayo ng nanay doon. Eh, tamad-tamad niyo. Ako, sipag. Ilahin natin yan.
Ngayong linggo, alas 12 ng tanghali. Dito lang sa Net 25.
Panalo tayo pag together, walang talo pag together. Let's get together sa Net 25.
Mahilig ka bang mag-travel at kumain? Ngayong Sabado, kakaibang trip naman ang hatid namin sa inyo. Sigurado nang mag-i-enjoy ang mga mata mo sa iba't ibang pagkain, sigurado pang maiinganyo kang magtanim. Ngayong Sabado, you don't have to panic. It's all organic. Dahil healthy na mga pagkain na farm fresh ang hatid namin sa inyo. Ito lang yan sa ulan. Kaagapay sa hanap buhay.
We bring you more stories from around the globe here on Mata ng Agila International. For the first time this year, the market price of gas in Europe has topped $800 per 1,000 cubic meters. Analysts say prices are rising as temperatures drop and industrial activity returns after the holidays. Temperatures on January 2nd to the 8th dropped only a degree from the previous week. But meteorologists say the upcoming week could see a drop of as much as 3 degrees. Meanwhile, EU countries approved the price cap on Russian gas at 180 euros per megawatt hour. The latest oil embargo will take effect on February 15. Business reports say Apple shipped more than $2.5 billion of iPhones. The reports say the phones came from Indian-based contract manufacturers between April and December last year. Analysts say the Foxconn Technology Group is responsible for around $1 billion. The new export record shows a major shift away from dependence on Chinese-based operations. India has incentive schemes and profitable conditions to welcome foreign companies. But some analysts think it would take nearly a decade to move 10% of Apple's production capacity outside of China, where 98% of iPhones are still produced. News sources say businesses in the Philippines do not expect the long weekends this year to significantly impact the operations of companies. Based on Presidential Proclamation number 90, there will be a total of 9 long weekends this year. Yet reports say some businesses still have inventories to do. Some employers cite their employees prefer working on holidays for extra pay rather than going on vacation. The Department of Tourism says the roster of regular holidays and special non-working days is an important stimulus to boost the domestic travel figures. The holidays allow travelers to stay longer in destinations and thus bring direct economic benefits to the local communities.
British football superstar Gareth Bale has retired. He is remembered as one of Britain's greatest players with a spectacular career at home and abroad. Bale was once the world's most expensive player. He moved to Real Madrid in 2013, where he is fondly remembered and loved by his supporters. Under his leadership, the 33-year-old dragged Wales from the wilderness of international football to 2 European championships and a first World Cup since 1958. During the Euro 2016 competition, Bale brought Wales to the semifinals, which became their first major international tournament in 58 years. Bale has a remarkable record of 111 caps for Wales with an additional 41 goals. The footballer described his journey being selected to play and lead Wales as incomparable. He said his journey on the international stage changed him.
The Film Development Council of the Philippines proudly shared Dolly De Leon's nomination at the Golden Globe Awards. Meanwhile, the Metro Manila Development Authority has plans for a summer Metro Manila Film Festival. Here's the report from Nadine Aguilar.
Actress Dolly De Leon is in the U.S. for the 80th Golden Globe Awards on January 11, 2023. De Leon is one of the Best Support Actress nominees for the film Triangle of Sadness. The actress has already won the Los Angeles Film Critics Association Award for her performance as Abigail in the film. Film Development Council Chairperson and CEO Tirso Cruz III says the intimate send-off party for De Leon can be counted as a victory party.
Malaking bagay yun eh. I mean, like kasi right now, Dolly is not just carrying herself, she's carrying the Philippines, eh, di ba? As an actress, sabi nga nila, well, nagkasama kami. We had a dinner together, parang send-off dinner, and then yun nga, sabi nga namin, noloko nga namin siya. Sabi namin, oh, Dolly, bring home the bacon. But I remembered si Direk Joey De Leon, sabi nga niya, no pressure, Dolly, because no matter what happens, you're already a winner. The mere fact na recognize ka nila, di ba?
In other news, the success of the recently held Metro Manila Film Festival has inspired the Metro Manila Development Authority to announce the first ever Summer Metro Manila Film Festival that will start on April 8, 2023. This is in collaboration with the Cinema Exhibitors Association of the Philippines. Tirso says this is a sign of having the energy back on Filipino cinemas.
Well, hopefully it carries through, di ba? Parang it's a sign na people are starting to go out again. Of course, you have to realize na naapektuhan talaga ang industriya nung 2.5 years ng pandemic. It's a worldwide problem that the pandemic brought, and hindi mo masisisi sa mga tao if they opted to stay indoors more because of health security, di ba? Ako, I'm looking forward para dito sa Summer Festival and keeping my fingers crossed that it will even be more promising.
Moreover, Tirso is excited about his comeback to the concert stage. It will be a get-together with his friends Edgar Mortiz and Christopher De Leon with actress Lovie Poe. Poe says this is a sign of going back to her first love, music.
16 ako when I started as a singer, and here I am doing this concert. Everything's going great. And I just want to be able to balance my life career-wise and also my personal life to make sure I have time for my loved ones as well.
The two-night concert will be held on February 3 and 4 at the Newport Performing Arts Theater in Pasay City. Nadine Aguilar for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
To kickstart some health goals for the new year, how about enjoying a nature hike? In San Antonio, Texas, Jane Kathleen Gregorio takes a tour of the trails in the historic Comanche Lookout Park.
Getting back in shape can be as simple as taking a walk in the park. According to San Antonio Parks and Recreation Department, studies show that people who spend time in parks are less sick often, which means less time missing school and work and lower healthcare costs. Local parks like the historic Comanche Lookout Park provide a place for people to not only exercise while enjoying fresh air and beautiful scenery, but also a venue for gathering with family and friends, including our four-legged companions. This 96-acre public park, owned by the city of San Antonio, includes Comanche Hill, the fourth highest point in Bexar County with an elevation of 1,340 feet. Throughout history, the site was used for commerce as well as a lookout point for Native Americans for thousands of years. One of the unique landmarks within the park itself is a 4-story castle-like tower built by retired USA Colonel Edward Coppock, one of the many previous owners of the land before it became a public park. Comanche Lookout Park has 3 trail systems with varying levels of difficulty, from easy beginners with gentle slopes that meet ADA standards, to intermediate with a slightly higher incline, and an advanced level with steeper slopes and no handrails. Each trail leads to the summit. Recently, local artists such as Carlos Cortez and Doroteo Garza collaborated on an art installation titled Najo Jam, which means Our Home. This tribute to over 10,000 years of indigenous heritage in the area is located at the Hills Summit, where visitors can not only interact with the artwork, but can also imagine standing where indigenous ancestors once stood while looking out over the scenic views of what is now the city of San Antonio and Bexar County.
Jane Kathleen Gregorio, Mata ng Agila International, San Antonio, Texas. Trusted, connected, on point.
Prince Harry's new memoir went on sale in London just after midnight on January 10. Fans of the prince outnumbered members of the media at a branch of W.H. Smith and Victoria Station, and it stayed open late for the lunch. Prince Harry's autobiography Spare debuted after months of excitement and sustained publicity. Copies of the book sold in the United Kingdom, posing more embarrassment for the royal family. The publication was accompanied by 4 television interviews in the UK and the United States. The ghost-written memoir will be available in 16 languages and an audiobook. Leaked copies mistakenly went on sale early in Spain. Early readers say the book narrates an encounter where Harry's brother William physically attacked him. They argued about Harry's wife Meghan and an admission of teenage drug use and a claim that Harry killed 25 people during his service in Afghanistan with the British military. So far, the royal family has not made any public reaction to Harry's memoir. It's Tuesday, and to help you go through this week, here's a quote from Aristotle, a Greek philosopher. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. It's always tempting to stay where you are comfortable, right? But then, do you grow? Exactly. I think you have to make it a daily thing to keep leveling up, stepping up your game so that tomorrow you're better and the day after you're even better. You have to keep learning. You have to keep learning if you want to be better and if you want to be good at what you do, actually. And that is a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Arago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.